for us. My name is Paul Sir. I'm the Executive Director of the Alberta Basketball Association. I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time and making the time to join us for the announcement of the ABA 2021-2025 Strategic Plan. We're pleased to share this with you tonight because it's the result of a lot of work by a lot of people for over the past year plus. We have had the idea to upgrade, revamp, redo, renew our strategic plan for a long time. And if there's a silver lining in the COVID crisis that we've all faced, I think so many of us have had to look for ways to remain productive and to remain effective in the midst of the challenge when everything that we love, everything we enjoy to do has been taken away in terms of activities. And so the Alberta Basketball Association Board of Directors and staff decided that they would forge ahead with their strategic plan on an accelerated basis. And the key really, along with great intentions, the input of a lot of wonderful people from across the province, is who was going to lead the process. We needed somebody with experience, with expertise, with great leadership abilities, and the rare ability to guide without telling what to think, but add meaningful input when we needed it. And we couldn't be happier with or more grateful for the efforts of our presenter tonight and the person who has led the ABA through this developmental process for our strategic, Mr. Ron Wattila. And so I'd like to introduce Ron to you now and turn it over to him, and Ron's going to take us through the introduction of our new strategic plan. Ron?
Thanks, Paul. Great to be with all of you who are with us here live tonight, and then those that weren't able to be here with us live and are watching the recorded version. Paul, I think I really appreciate the compliment personally. I think the words you shared at the front end of that opening were perfect because it described our situation so well. Is trying to be productive in a time when what we love most has been taken away from us. So I have the good fortune of being able to share this information with all of you, and but it is I'm certainly representing dozens and dozens of people, and you're going to get a sense of this as we go through this presentation. In a perfect world, we would have this as an interactive exercise where you could ask questions through chat or live conversation, and we just concluded that would be a bit too challenging. So you see the generic email for the Basketball Alberta office. Please send in questions that you've got. Any and all are welcome, because this really is work that is intended to impact everyone who plays the sport, loves the sports, and works in the sport in our province. So I will take you on a journey. I'm using a product called Miro, M-I-R-O. It's what I think an upgraded version of PowerPoint, so hopefully it works for you. And if you're curious about this tool, if you haven't seen it before, miro.com. I should probably buy some stock in it. It's a great tool for these sorts of things. So let's talk a little bit about the process, and Paul touched on it. The board of the ABA began talking about the need to build a strategic plan for 2021 to 2025 in the fall of 2019. Pre-March of 2020, there were conversations that took place. I was fortunate to be part of one of them, kind of shaping up what could this look like. And like for many people in March of April of 2020, there's this kind of flash and you go, okay, what do we do now? And there was some really good leadership behavior to say we need to keep marching on. And in fact, in many ways, this might allow us to be more, in an odd way, productive in building this plan. And I think the plan that we mapped out for those first 3 or 4 months was excellent. I'll walk you through that here shortly. But that gives you a sense of the timing of how, we're going back quite a ways now when this all kicked off. In the work that I do with sports organizations, I talk a lot about and almost require everyone to declare their intention. Because if we don't do that right at the front end and get really clear about what it is we're trying to do, sometimes all the noise that we're experiencing as we dig into the actual task gets in the way and clouds wide as we started this. And so I'll just leave this on the screen for a few moments here. And as you read it, you can see there's lots of things that focus in on purpose and principles and priorities and vision and mission. And I'm a huge believer in the work that I do with sports organizations that it's quite easy actually to determine what it is you want to do at the back end, at the outcome, increase participation by this number or deliver X. It's harder and frankly more important to talk about what are the foundational principles, because ultimately great organization, great people, frankly, great basketball teams know who they are, where they're going, and how they're going to go about doing it. And you're going to see a lot of that in this presentation today. So this intention is super important. And the beauty of Miro and PowerPoint and everything else, we're going to drip in pictures of the things that matter most to us. And that's, referees, coaches, players, and rubbing our hands together. Can't wait to all of us. I know so many people on the call here today are so keen to get back on the court in a meaningful way. So and I think the other thing I would go back on intention is that whether we're dealing with an unusual world for a stretch or whether we're back to normal, all the principles that were outlined in that intention apply. So that's what one of the real advantages was of doing it during 2020 was that it really doesn't matter kind of what stage of the pulling out of COVID we're going through, these principles apply, and they apply for other huge opportunities that are going to come down the pipe for the sport of basketball in the province of Alberta in the future. It's important in this context of this presentation and frankly, in understanding the intention of the work the Basketball Alberta does, to understand these four concepts, because they're a big part of the strategic plan. And the four of them are mission, vision, framework, and standards. And we're going to walk you through these as we go along tonight. Mission, some people define these differently, and I just find it easiest to say as the consultant in these projects, this is how we're going to define it, because we have to get some black and white on these sorts of things. So your mission as an organization is why you exist. Why did somebody decide you should exist? Why does somebody give you money? Why are you here on Earth? To be somewhat dramatic about it. Vision is where you're going. Where do you want to land in 6 months, 6 years, 10 years, whatever it may be. Framework is a basic underlying structure that helps to describe what good should look like. It's a recipe for your favorite meal. It's a recipe for your favorite vacation. It's a recipe for your favorite basketball team. What are all the ingredients that need to be in place? And the standards are undeniable behaviors that will drive all the things that will allow you to achieve your vision and to serve your mission and to work through your framework and ensure that it is the right framework. The timeline that we followed for, and we'll get into sharing these with you, there'll be a big unveiling of the new mission and vision for ABA here shortly, and in quite a bit of detail, we'll walk you through the framework and the standards. The timeline for this exercise, again, in January, February of 2020, we started talking about what this could look like. We had virtual engagement with the staff, senior leadership board on those dates in May. We executed a community survey in May and June of the spring last year. We did community engagement activities, which I'll talk more about in a bit, where we had conversations with key leaders on the coaching side, sport leadership, referees, on the dates you see there. And then from that point, myself and people within the organization put work into shaping up what you're going to see today. And this strategic plan, the framework of it, the concept, has been approved by the board in the middle of March, as you see noted there. Again, so and pausing just to, as we start to look at some charts, at some things that may have a bit of a governance slant to them and make you think, well, this really isn't basketball. Well, all of the stuff that you're going to see as we roll this out are about the people you see in these pictures, is providing young men and women, coaches, referees with a chance to experience joy in the sport that they love. So that's the the only reason that any of this work is being done is for these people, and we'll continue to flash up images of these important folks as we move along. So in May, or approximately May of last year, we circulated a survey, kept it open for a couple of weeks, and asked people to respond to the survey. Now, we know that there are some people who dive into these sorts of things, and we also know that some people who maybe don't dive into them because they do a lot of them, or we're super busy, or I mean, think about that, what was going on in our lives, in May, and in many ways, continues to be a distraction. And then there's also people who don't have access to computers in the same way that other people do. So we're not saying that this is absolute pure black and white response from the basketball community, but we did pick up some trends from some of the questions that we asked. And the questions were categorized into 4 general areas. What are the priorities? What creates a quality participant experience? What are the objectives that will lead ABA to successfully govern basketball in the province of Alberta? And what are the key opportunities that are just sitting in front of us, waiting for us to jump all over them? And what I want to draw your attention to, you certainly can look at some of the percentages, and apologies that this is a bit fuzzy in terms of clarity, but I draw your attention to the word athlete and develop, and how it's really no surprise that people in this survey, through this feedback loop, said develop our athletes, provide opportunities for our athletes. That's what matters most. And the other thing we picked up, and we also picked it up in the community forums, and you'll see that momentarily, is things about relationships and connection. So you'll see the medals highlighted here, highlighting a comment around, or an answer to the survey around improving the relationships between basketball organizations. And down a little bit lower here, you'll see, let's invest time in standardizing how we rule the game and our policies across the province in the sport of basketball. So so that certainly gave us a bit of information that was valuable. There's no denying it. And I would have guessed that about that many people would have responded. So I think the response to it was about in line with what we would have expected. And then in June and August, we selected a group of people, and that's always hard to do, to select rather than have it wide open. But we in selecting the group, we had about a 95 compliance rate. And I think the 5% of people who couldn't just had things they could not move. Somebody teaching, somebody in a work project that just, they couldn't shift it. And we had to lock down dates and times. So I can tell you that I did this with another organization where we had it wide open, and it didn't go as well. I think that being really targeted around who we selected was worked quite well in this particular instance. So what the reason that we're sharing this with you is that this is part of the outcome of the work that was done during those forums. What we did is we held calls like this, or Zoom calls like this, for a couple of hours, 2 or 3 times during the course of a week in May. And we asked questions just like the survey questions. What are the priorities? What are the objectives? What are our opportunities? What do we need to be keeping in mind as we build a strategic plan? And these are the white sheets that were on my wall while I was on vacation, hiding from my wife as I was and my kids as we were away. But it was a good place to facilitate a session, because I had a big flat wall to work with and put these white sheets up. So up here you'll see highlighted some trends that came out of those conversations, and it was things like, let's get united, let's connect the basketball community in the province of Alberta. How about there being a hub, a place that we can go to get access to information? So this world is becoming more and more virtual every month, it seems. Can't we create a hub where the person who just came to the sport of basketball, or the person who's 20 years in, can easily access information? We need to work on our relationships within the community, and I don't think that ever stops, frankly. Another thing that came out of the forums was, feedback on, it's important for ABA to really declare who they are. Like, what is the specific role of the organization? And that was, shared in a pretty productive way, but also in a very direct way, that they thought it was important to people. So just sharing these with you, because I, fortunately took the pictures, but you see some trends around some key messages there. Also, just to show We did do a snapshot of some of the folks that were in one of our meeting rooms, and really just to show that some pretty detailed work took place as we broke out and had people dig into things like opportunities, which is what they were doing in this particular room. And all these notes really drove us building our mission, our vision, and strategic objectives, a whole assortment of things. So before I go there, the next slide.
Or anything like that they're actually showing within class, because I'm sure if you get into any kind of.
So somebody's live on there. I think we've got that sorted out. So the drum roll, please. If somebody had a drum and could give me a drum roll, they would. And what you see in front of you is a number of things. A symbol that represents at a very high level the mission, the vision, the values, the standards, kind of in one moment. And this symbol here, and you saw it earlier with the Basketball Alberta, the ABA logo in the middle of it, really is significant here, because what we heard, if you look at these 4 words, united, align, execute, and engage, really sums up the last year of work we've done with the community and with the organization around how do we need to move forward in 2021 to 2025. We need to get aligned. We need to engage people more effectively, engage each other more effectively, and ultimately we need to execute at a very high level. And if we do all of this, we will slowly but surely become more united as a basketball community. The mission, I will read these off. Of course, you can as well. I'll zoom in a little bit as I go through them so you can see them more clearly. The mission going forward for this next 4-year period as the governing body for basketball in Alberta, to provide leadership for the development of athletes, coaches, and referees. So if you take it in its purest form, this answers the question, why does the ABA exist? Full stop. This is the answer. And that's how you utilize mission and vision really successfully, because ultimately these things should help organizations, and this could be for clubs and school teams and you name it, anything that connects to basketball in our province. You should all have these. And for the ABA, this is the mission going forward. And I know that board and staff and senior leaders are super excited about this. The vision, which is a destination, it's a place you go to. I want to win a national championship. I want to sell the most widgets. I want to do 10 pieces of art in 2021. For ABA, their vision, their destination is to drive and inspire a united basketball community in Alberta. So it's a very ambitious vision in my mind, in that ultimately there's a destination where the basketball community in Alberta is more united, is more collaborative, is working together more effectively, and that ultimately that is part of one of the key elements of the strategic plan, and it's the vision. Values were discussed at the staff level, the board level, to treat everyone with dignity and respect, and act with integrity in all that we do. Now, standards are super important. Standards are undeniable statements around how one behaves to achieve goals, serve the mission, and help drive towards achieving your vision, the destination that you're going to, a more united basketball community in the province of Alberta. So the standards are that the sport of basketball is accessible to all, that the governing body, the ABA, is accessible to all, that there's commitment to ongoing excellence, inclusive and safe basketball, purposeful in all of our actions as an organization, and complete organizational transparency. So that's on the record. So all of this stuff is on the record, and ultimately is saying that, this is how ABA certainly has worked in many ways, and is really laser focused on working as we move through the next, if we want to call it a quadrennial, the next 4-year period. And I think you're going to see, you're going to see this logo a lot, and it really should be a reminder as to what's the essence of the work that ABA does over these next 4 years. Now, the next piece of the work we've done is more detailed. Now, it's not that this took more work than the mission and vision. In fact, quite often there's so few words with the mission, vision, and value, you think, well, that couldn't have been that hard, but it is hard because every word matters. Because ultimately you have to go back to those things to help you answer questions around what do we do next and what do we do in this particular situation. What you see here is what's called a framework. And in the work that I do with sport organizations, whether it be individual coaches or particular programs or NSOs or PSOs, I almost require everyone to do a framework. And ultimately what a framework is, it's a recipe for success. So the question I ask before we do a framework is I say, what are the ingredients to the most successful provincial basketball organization in Canada? And you start from there. And I did this primarily with board and staff. I certainly took quite a bit from the community engagement sessions. And what you see in front of you is the recipe, okay? It's the recipe for success. If everything's where it needs to be, the organization will be successful. And it's ultimately can act like a grading exercise. So it's a way to grade yourself every quarter, every year, every 4 years, and it's on the record. So you don't lose sight of it. You're able to go back and say, okay, yeah, 4 years ago, we set this up. And I'll talk to you a little bit about the grading here in a moment. And this is where we are. So and I'll get over to the funny picture you can see on your left in a moment, just to make a comparison to a little bit of real life. But ultimately, any recipe has some core components, and we call these dimensions. So the 6 dimensions that you see, so the 6 most important elements of the recipe for success for the ABA are community engagement, membership, education and development, partnerships, programs and events, and management and operations. And below that, what you can see is each of those dimensions broken down into smaller details. And those are called elements. And I don't expect, there's not a test on this, anyone. Nobody's going to get graded. Don't expect you to remember all of this, but there's actually another layer altogether where we break down each of those elements so that you're really describing, okay, well, what does good communication look like? And what do good policies look like? And what does a good relationship look like with the municipalities? And what does a good operational plan look like for our programs? And you're going back to that constantly to grade yourself and see how you're doing. So if we were to compare it to real life, and some people, I'm hoping on the call today, have actually had this meal. This is a meal that I make called Chicken Big Mamu. And it is one of the top 10 meals in the world. I'm quite convinced of that. And it came originally from a Paul Prudhomme recipe from a book called Louisiana Kitchen, that over the course of about 25 years, it has evolved into a world-class meal. And I can tell you that my ingredients in my framework for my meal that I call Chicken Big Mamu, and ultimately ends up being a large social activity and nobody really remembers the meal, are that the ingredients are, obviously the ingredients for the food is key. The timing of how I cook it is key. The beer that I serve is key. The bread is really important for dunking, and the social space and the space that we have this in it. So those are all my frameworks. Those are all my dimensions for my world-class recipe that I call Chicken Big Mamu. And I can grade myself, and I'm pretty much green across the board because I've been doing it for 25 years and I'm the only one who grades it, which isn't really the real world that ABA is in, but making the comparison to, you can do this with anything, whether it's a club organization or a community basketball organization. You can build frameworks to identify, what are the key ingredients that I need to have in place. And I can tell you, and one of the messages, the really important messages I'm trying to share with this slightly humorous, connected story is that the recipe changes. So 25 or 30 years ago, this was a great recipe, but in basketball, 25 or 30 years ago, there was a recipe for success for PSOs in the sport of basketball, and it changes. And so we always have to evolve and keep an eye on this framework and identify that something has shifted in our sport, and clearly we're going to have some shifts here over the next 12 to 24 months. And this framework, it needs to be adaptable. So the other thing that we do with this framework is we identify a grading scheme. So what you can see here, and I'll zoom in a little closer, is that there's 3 grades that these dimensions and elements can receive. Green is performing, amber is doing okay, moderate performance, and red is we need to pay some attention to this. And it's clean, it's simple. Lots of people do the traffic light exercise. This is not anything incredibly unique. But what you can see here is, and this is a first draft, it is the ABA's, and most organizations, frankly, folks, don't do this. They don't make public their grades at the same time as making public their framework. But this is their swing at, okay, well, right now, we'd say that in community engagement, we're green with communication, and we're needs attention in our community response, and so on and so forth. So in some of the partnerships, you know, we're a green with this organization and we're a yellow with this one, and there would be a story to that. And so you're by doing the grading, you're able to say, okay, well, in the areas where we're amber and red, what's our strategy for moving up 1 grade, moving from red to amber or moving from amber to green? The organizations that I've worked with that have really leaned into the framework have benefited greatly from it, because it's a foundational piece of work that you can consistently go back to. And ultimately, of course, it's all about these people on the right-hand side. You're trying to make partnerships and experiences for them much better, as I try and make my chicken Big Mamu even better the next time that I serve it. Shifting into kind of a more action-oriented perspective on the strategic plan, and Bob is going to join me here momentarily to talk about some of these key priorities that you're going to see on this sheet. What you see here again is that whole concept of we're united through alignment, good execution, and engagement with the basketball community. And what you'll see here is those dimensions I referred to back a step in the framework are now listed on this particular sheet as strategic objectives, as the 6 pillars of the strategic objectives. So community engagement, membership, et cetera, those are the pillars, the most important things that Basketball Alberta will be doing for the next 4 years. And the way that they'll be doing them is in terms of descriptions of how that work should look are itemized here in the white font. So inclusive, accessible, purposeful. So you have to describe how it is you're going to go about doing it, what your priorities are when you identify your strategic objectives. Certainly there's another whole document that would be the operational plan and more of a goal identified link to the strategy. That would be an internal document that would drive staff work plans and a whole assortment of initiatives. But I want to have Bob join us and just talk about these 3 key priorities that are at the very top of the work that will be done over the next 4 years, through the strategic plan.
Did I get that figured out there?
I think you did.
Okay, thanks very much, Ron. As you know, during the process, you had trouble keeping me on track, so I'm going to sidestep for just a second here to get ourselves going. First of all, when Paul and I met with Ron to start talking about it, I think we all realized the most exciting thing was it was an opportunity for Basketball Alberta to reach out to the basketball community to set where we're going, rather than starting to go somewhere and then getting feedback on how we're doing. So I think that was a really important change. And as you've heard from Ron already, he was the guy to do it. And his commitment to the project is phenomenal. He certainly kept us all on task. And I think the document that we presented is one that's going to guide us very well for the next years to come. I'd like to also, though, introduce our board, who we seldom have a chance to talk about, and make sure everybody knows who we are. I am Bob Mitchell, the president. Vince Tripathy is a vice president. Mark Dzeniak is vice president and secretary. Ron Betker is treasurer. Chad Bowie is the Director at Large, Val Mumford, Director at Large, Mike Myers, Director at Large, Jay Willett, Director at Large, Perry Stothert, Director at Large, Kara Van Horn, Director at Large, and Tom West, Director at Large. This is the biggest group of directors, not in size, but in numbers that we have had. And they are clearly committed to moving us ahead. The other exciting part is in the group, there is 4 new directors, and it's given us better representation across the province. So it's very welcome. As a board, we are committed, and this project is an example of it, to making sure that we're taking the lead in setting directions and also in providing oversight for how we're doing with things. So if you do have any questions, comments, or anything, all of our board members are accessible, and certainly feel free to give us a call to let us know how you think we're doing, or if you have different ideas. And the other group I would like to thank, though, with this project is our staff. They've put a lot of work into getting something that we can see and we can actually feel. And in particular, I think Jeff Bailey deserves a lot of credit for putting together the project and then helping to take us through it so that we all understand it well. Ron gave us a challenge throughout, and one that to me was an important one, is that this document can be a great collection of words and intentions, but if we don't bring it to life and make sure we live it, then we're letting everybody down who participated in it. And I think Ron would probably find a way to come back from the warmer climates to haunt us and keep us back on track. But it's really important that we're all committed to follow through with it. From all of those directions, though, is as a board, we've been talking now for our last 3 meetings, is we need to make sure that we set some priorities, because there's so much in here to be accomplished. Some of it is operational, that are things that we will naturally do as part of good practice that we follow. And other parts are things that are going to take new initiatives and new work. So certainly, when you look at the priorities that are stated there, you can see increase athlete coaching and referee development. The coaching and athlete development has been a key part that's guided us for many years, but we're really pleased now to be working more closely with the Referees Association and working with them to help them develop their programs and make sure they're attracting new members to the referee corps. Membership program review is going to become really, really important. One of our visionary commitments that we have made is to take a look at everyone who plays the game of basketball in Alberta being members. And if we are to take on that challenge, we are certainly recognizing that our current concept of membership, how it's constructed, the fee structure, what is offered, the relationships we have with the groups is going to have to change. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done in that area, and also in the governance and operations. And I think we were all really, really not surprised, but COVID brought this really to the forefront for us. It's the first time in 10 years with basketball that everyone in Alberta was looking to Canada Basketball, a national sports organization, and then us as a provincial sports organization to help set directions for return to play and what should be done. And I think that just gave us the initiative to realize that that is what needs to happen for us with sports in the basketball sport in Alberta, to pull us all together. And we can have many, many different views on how to do it. However, if we all work together, there's no question we'll do a better job for the kids. And essentially, that's why we all exist. So Ron, I'd like to thank you once more for the work that you've done, and certainly any questions or comments would be welcome to be sent to us. So thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Really appreciate it. And obviously there's so much to talk about around those priorities, but great to hear you articulate them, and clearly that those will be super important here over the coming months and years. And Bob, I will come back. So well put, no matter how cold it is. So, but I feel really connected to this, and it's been a ton of fun doing the work. And I also appreciate how honest you are about the first couple of conversations that we had about this, and how on board you were throughout it. We go to here because we just were in a spot that kind of was a lot of words and statements and symbols, and it's all about this, obviously, and getting ourselves back into a position where we're doing this the way that we want to, and the way that we love to. And I'm going to pass it over here to Paul to wrap up. But I guess my final comments to everyone on this call, whether you're watching live or recorded, is that I think that it's a great sign that this organization has dug in and really publicly defined who they are, where they're going, and how they're going to go about doing it. And they have to hold themselves to account, and the basketball community has to do that as well, because this is about a united experience. And ultimately 4 years from now in 2025, when we look back, if people can say, yeah, we're just being more collaborative, there's more engagement across our community, that's a win. And that's where it really needs to go. I'd also throw out a challenge to the basketball organizations, and there's many of them that I'm sure that have done this effectively, is dig into your own story about who you are, why you exist, and where you're going. There's so much for all of you to do, but until you've done that, you won't be able to really max out on the potential that exists with your people. And frankly, we're all going to need to be super nimble over the next 3 or 4 years, I think, and in really good ways, and maybe even in some frustrating ways. And if you don't know why you exist or where you're going, it's harder to do those things. And I have the good fortune of working with what is now dozens of organizations to see people really thrive, and see folks who maybe struggle a little bit with it. So I appreciate the chance to be a part of this. And Paul, over to you to close.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Bob, for your comments. Ron, thank you for the presentation. You've encapsulated the work, you've laid out the journey, and you've done it in a way that's understandable, it's relatable. And I think I hope, sincerely hope, everybody who has joined us tonight has a good understanding of what went into this, and more importantly, what's come out of it, and what we regard as our roadmap for moving forward. I think throughout this process, the entire group that participated, all were anxious to be heard, but also to think outside of the box. I think everybody's intentions were rooted in focusing on the athlete's experience, focusing on principles such as safety in sport, inclusion. I really look at what we've done with creating the strategic plan as a construction project. I've looked at it as we're building foundations for our organization, but we're building foundations for all of the kids, all of the coaches, all of the families that are part of this great sport. We're building bridges between organizations, between groups, between cultures, and that's so critical. We're building opportunities, and in the end, what I love about basketball, and I love about all sport, all activities, but since we're immersed in the game that we love, I love that we're building lives together, and we're creating a better way forward for those that are participating. And we really feel that higher calling through the use of this strategic plan to really delve into what our values as an organization, certainly, but as a sport as well. So my call to action, my request humbly with everybody tonight is that we align and unite to move basketball in Alberta forward together and challenge all of us to think the best of each other and to work forward in accomplishing this. Finally, I'd like to thank, as Bob did, our staff, because the hours that went into this were incredible. Bob highlighted Jeff, and Jeff certainly deserves that kind of credit for his leadership. Natalie, Ethan, Dion, Reagan, Steve, Brian, all contributed mightily to getting this done. I want to thank our board of directors for diving in so willingly. Thank all of those who've participated with us on our various meetings together, giving your heartfelt, intelligent, and observations and input. And finally, of course, I want to thank Ron Watilla one more time. Ron deserves one more symbol of gratitude for all that he's done to create this. So everyone, once again, mostly thank you for joining us tonight. Any questions you have, you can contact our office, whether it's for our staff, board of directors, or whatever. We're there to answer your questions, and we're there to accept and willingly and gladly accept any input that you might have for us. So I will sign off now just by saying, once again, we are faced with another challenge with COVID-19, the gift, unfortunately, that just seems to keep on giving. But even though it doesn't feel like it, the end is in sight. How far off it is, we don't know. As Ron indicated, it's going to be very different on the other side of this. We don't know how different or different in what ways, but at least from the basketball standpoint, the Alberta Basketball Association looks forward to working with everyone in the province and across the country to build our great game and to build great lives. So thank you so much for joining us tonight.